So we are continuing our conversation on creativity and exploring that JFK ideal. And if I can get everyone to just sit as close as possible, because we're going to work this a little differently. Since you have already heard from Miss Alice Waters and Mr. Dave Eggers today, we really want to get into a conversation with you around creativity, as opposed to having it be more presentational. So get as close as you can, because you just feel so far right now. Come on, it's okay. You? Perfect. Everyone should take a page from your book. So just to remind you who my friends here are, we have chef, author, food activist, and founder of Chez Panisse Restaurant and the Edible Schoolyard Project, Alice Waters, and writer, editor, and publisher, and founder of 826 Writing Works, Youth Writing Workshops, Dave Eggers. So welcome them back. So we are, oh, and I want to introduce you to one other person. This is Anne Marie. She is taking notes for us. And so we've been charged with a task. And I'm going to get us all in on this. I don't know if the other groups are getting this information, but we've been charged with the task of addressing the question, what are the preconditions to creativity? Okay? And Anne-Marie is going to be taking some notes about what we say and what conclusions we come to as a group. And then Davida, our Citizen Artist Fellow, is going to share that out when we all come back together with the other summit participants a little bit later this afternoon. So I was talking to Dave and Alice, and I was saying that for me, the question, what are the preconditions to creativity? It almost sounds like a question that's on the way to another question. And so I thought maybe we take the angle of looking at and defining creative space. And so I'm putting the question to everyone in the room, not just to the folks sitting here with me. When you think of being in a creative space, internally, mentally, emotionally, what does it feel like? What are its characteristics? What is that personal creative space like for you? Because I think if we can kind of crack that nut, I think that's the thing that sometimes, trips people up, is finding that space for themselves. I think if we can crack that, we can get a sense of what these preconditions are. So call it out. Who wants to go first? No wrong answers. Just call it out. I think if you start talking, they'll pick you up. Yeah, it should be on.
So much good stuff, so little time. I would say the first question to ask as a Socratic philosophy teacher is, where do you feel your creativity lies within you?
Okay.
And locating that, and what does space mean?
So what's your answer to that?
Which one?
Both of them.
Well, I think the first one, it takes a certain amount of time and reflection and freedom of thought. I think it definitely requires solitude and privacy, or privacy, depending on which side of the pond you started. And as well, it's one of those matters that needs encouragement as young in life as possible, preferably by parent or parents, family environment. The second one, where's the physicist when we need him? I could talk years with him about this. Are we talking spatial time relations? Are we talking a different definition of space, etc.? And if those qualifications are not specific enough, good, because it leaves to the individual person the chance to make some of those determinations. Notice I didn't use the word definition, and I do want to get something in from the morning, and that was, excuse me, Philosophy of language happens to be one of my favorite fields. I've written about it and given presentations. And what I was hearing was balkanization of disciplines, unfortunately. I was also hearing a loss of the denotation of a word to its connotation. I was hearing sciences. Now, for anyone who had the opportunity and the pleasure, eventually, of studying Greek and Latin, scientia means knowledge. Scio, it means I know. It doesn't mean the scientiae naturae, the sciences of the place of birth.
I'm going to pause you for 1 second, because we really want to take the time and get to everyone and have people give their contributions to this topic of creativity and finding that creativity space. So my job right now is to keep this train on this track. So thank you for opening up those questions of where does it lie within you, because I think that's important. I think personal definition is key to creativity. And so, Alice, I'm going to come to you right now.
Well, I can really, I come from two places. Mm-hmm. I come from the place of my own, which is definitely in the kitchen, cooking. And I'm thinking when I'm doing that, and I'm connected to a very natural process. Mm-hmm. And I'm washing lettuces, and I'm in a rhythm of doing something. And I love that I'm doing something very useful at the same time that I'm dreaming up an idea. I'm using that as almost an interactive experience. Mm-hmm. But it's for me rarely solitary. I'm needing a discourse, and always I've asked people for their opinions, and I'm trying to, does this sound right? Mm-hmm. How could I say it better? How could I write this more precisely? Because I'm trying to really say something that's as right as rain. And so I'm searching for the language of that. But a key to it is not, it's about pleasure for me, hugely about pleasure. And so I'm looking for a space that's beautiful. Mm-hmm. And I always find myself outside in nature, because I think nature, she is our mother, and everybody has access to nature. And when I'm sad or when I'm frustrated about something, I go for a walk. Mm-hmm. And I just don't walk anywhere. I walk in some place that's, it's beautiful trees. Or I go to the beach. But I just feel like I'm incredibly lucky that I sort of had this realization about, certainly about beauty. Mm-hmm. And I sort of have followed that. Things that made me feel good. I'm not a long-suffering artist who goes into a room by himself or herself. I'm just really, really wanting that interaction. And then on the other side, I'm a Montessori teacher. Mm-hmm. And she believed that the way to engage children from very, very young was in preparing the classroom, as she called it. And she wanted to prepare the classroom so that these young people would kind of fall in love with it. So the materials were always very beautiful, and always she asked the kids to help to take care of the things in the room, mm-hmm. To pick the flowers, to put in the vase, to polish the table, to engage them in kind of practical life exercises, to make the room beautiful and to empower them themselves. And as Maria Montessori said, and I deeply, deeply, deeply believe, that everybody can find him or herself and be creative and do work that they love, do meaningful work. Everybody can. There was never a child that couldn't find that under, the right circumstances. They were obviously fed in the morning
Right.
before they went to school,
Right.
and really cared for. Care is very, very important. I guess I'll stop there.
So I've heard pleasure, I've heard nature, I've heard beauty, I've heard preparation, I've heard care, I've heard nourishment, community.
Absolutely.
And so now turning to the man who earlier talked about sitting in the writing room, in the writing position, I think that was the phrase, for 8 hours.
I could never do that.
How do you, Dave, define creative space?
Well, it's really different for me as an
Sure.
adult because I'm in a garage, and when I write and there's nothing there,
Garage.
it has to be basically bare. It's a very, if you look at it, it looks really sad and depressing. But I need sort of real isolation, and I don't, turn off everything. I have no phone, no Wi-Fi, nothing like that. I have to sort of completely isolate myself and have those 8 hours to pretend to write. And but with the spaces that we created for the 826 centers, and I say we because we started the one in San Francisco. I'm pointing up there because I'm going to show a few slides in a minute, and maybe we can set up set up the first slide. The other centers around the country, after we started the one in San Francisco, that was the Pirate Store. Other groups, a group in Brooklyn said, okay, we're going to start a center here, but it's going to be different. And then around the country, people started their own. And we, in San Francisco, would give them our blessing, but it was always a local thing. It had to be local, had to be local designers, local creative people, and with the participation of the families and the kids in the neighborhood. But I'll show a few slides real quick because I love slides. But this is, as you can see, this is the Pirate Store. Has anybody here been there? One guy, all right. It exists, right? It's real supplies. So you can see we designed these weird drawers and crooked bookshelves and everything like that just to make it look as strange as possible. Everywhere you look, there's like hatches and drawers that you open and discover different things. Right where you're standing right here on the lower right-hand corner, there's like a box above your head that if you stand in the right place, we pull a cord and a bunch of mop heads drop on your head. So we have kids, if kids come in with their parents, we sneak them in the back and we say, come here, come here. And then they position their parents underneath the box and then drop the mop heads on their box or on their kids or their family or loved ones. This is the eyeball section. We sell replacement eyeballs in case you lose one in one of the pirate-related accidents. This is how, these are all the caring for your eyeball supplies. This is the eye patch area with all the black eye patches for everyday use and all the pastel colors for weddings and bar mitzvahs, christenings, things like that. And here's another view of the Pirate Store. It's actually very rich in color. Everything has to be, like Alice was saying, like tactile, like woods and metals, and there's nothing plastic. It all has to be kind of period appropriate and stuff, not just about pirates, because we don't have pirate imagery. It has to be for pirates. So you have to be like a working buccaneer. Which is different. It's not like corny, stuff with, pirates saying "arr" and stuff like that. It's like actually working pirate gear. And here you see all these drawers. There's about 50 drawers that you open. You always discover different things. This one's on the floor. And then right behind it is the tutoring center. So this is what it looks like on any afternoon. It's jammed with kids and adults working shoulder to shoulder on their homework, on projects of various sizes and scopes. And so this opened in 2002, and then this is the group in Brooklyn. They said, well, we're going to have a storefront too, but we don't know about pirate supplies if they're going to work in Brooklyn, but how about crime-fighting supplies? So this became the Brooklyn Superhero Supply Company. And you can see inside, it kind of looks like a Costco for superheroes. This is the cape testing area where you can get on steel-grated steps, and test your cape with the industrial fans. And then you look in the back, the shelf actually moves, and it reveals a secret door to the tutoring center in the back. And you can see that the time in all 5 boroughs of New York is listed back there. This is a dated photo. You can see those old Macs. We usually get our computers donated, but they're not quite that old now. And then that led to this center in Echo Park, LA. This is the Echo Park Time Travel Mart, which looks like a 7-Eleven for time travelers, with the slogan, "Whenever you are, we're already then." And it looks so much like a 7-Eleven that people come in looking for detergent and soap, and so we have to carry a lot of that stuff. And, and then in Roxbury, like I mentioned this morning, this is the Greater Boston Bigfoot Research Institute, which is, my family's from Roxbury way back when, and this is just a very incongruous place there because there's not a whole lot of Yeti research in Boston. But anyway, and then you can see it inside. This is supplies donated by MIT and some other, and the Smithsonian. This is real scientific stuff in there. And then here you have, again, this is 826 Boston every day after school. And then that led to spaces around the country, around the world. This is one in London that's based on the model, not directly affiliated, but they borrowed the idea. This is the Hoxton Street Monster Supply Company in Shoreditch, London. This is a space, the Sydney Story Factory in Sydney, Australia, which has got to be probably the coolest place of all of them, that looks like the inside of a whale. And then this is the newest space in San Francisco, the city. In the Tenderloin district of the city, there was a spot on what's known as Pill Hill at Golden Gate and Leavenworth. There was Big Boy Liquors, and the city really, there was a lot of drug dealing being done in and outside of the space, and they told the landlord that he had to shut this down and moved us into the space to open a tutoring center. And one of our kids at middle school, Horace Mann, suggested a tree fort inside the building. So we had a carpenter build the tree fort inside the building. So this is still in progress, but you can see this is just, I'm not good at theory, but I'm when you know a creative space when you see it, I think. And so we allow the kids and the creative community to get involved in creating a space that the second you walk into it, and I think the kids especially, a lot of the kids that we work with, they've been in school 8 hours. They're going to spend another 3 hours with us. So that space has to look different, has to be creative, has to be anarchic. And I think that once you pass through a space like that, the brain chemistry changes a little bit. And you say, okay, well, I can spend a few more hours here, and I can be listened to, and it feels organically creative and strange and fun, and it's bright and weird. And so we try to unlock that joy that our Surgeon General mentioned earlier, just through the creative environment, just by the physical space. So I know that we were talking more about the theoretical, creative,
about all of it.
But I think that space itself, since we have so many arts administrators here, I think that space, and it doesn't have to be expensive. It can be very cheap. It can be, it just has to have that spirit of anarchy, I think, that is what creativity is all about anyway. And I think too often we say, now be creative, and we give a sort of a sterile environment, or we give a sterile list of conditions, like write an essay, but it has to be 5 paragraphs and a topic sentence, and we give this list of rules beforehand that it's anything but conducive to creativity. So I'll stop right now. But
no, I was just going to add on to that. I think about it in the same way, that it's just something that they just want to explore, want to see what's this about. But I use all of the senses, so I'm trying to get to them through the sense of smell, particularly, and taste. So if a room doesn't smell good, I just burn some rosemary in it. I start a fire. I'm just trying to get to the unconscious place where they remember, the bread coming out of the oven. I mean, there's fire and definitely the aroma of something cooking in that fire are magnets for I think, for everybody. They want to go and see what's there. And then if you further have something that they're kind of touching, like the air coming through the cape. You're wearing this cape and the air is coming through and you're feeling this thing. And then you're looking. It's, and then you know that you've got them in a certain way.
And so now we have,
opened them up.
so we have an anarchic environment, something that's tactile, no rules, get rid of the rules.
We enforce the rules on the back end,
Yeah.
you know, and it was a teacher
Give things shape.
at a high school in San Francisco, called Thurgood Marshall High School, which is a great high school right on the outskirts of the city. And it was a teacher named Jesse Madway who said, you know, the rules will be there, we'll do the grammar, we'll do everything on the back end, but putting it in the front end is actually going to squash or paralyze any of that sort of creativity. But if you say write free, write passionately, write what you really believe in, and then on the back end, it'll be grammatically correct. It'll be held to professional standards. This is one of the books. We publish books of student writing, and it's always professionally copy edited, printed, everything. So professional standards every step of the way, but on the front end, you have to feel unleashed. And actually, while I mentioned that, speaking of professional standards, I don't know if you guys have read the essay. One of the students from DC is Carly. Yeah, there's Carly.
She is.
She's right here, the author. This is a fantastic essay. She's at Duke Ellington High School. Are you guys all from Duke Ellington? Just, if you ever get a chance to visit, it's a fantastic school that we've had the 826DC has had the pleasure of working with over the years. And I want to introduce Arisa from 826DC, who will say hello. But you know, the same thing. It's like, however you want to get started writing, you need to feel inspired, however that is, whether it's in traditional prose or some other form. But then the rest of the process will be, you know, to a professional level. And every time we work with students and we say we're going to publish a book together, young people, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, will always rise to whatever standard you set. It's just a matter of sort of knowing that it's going to be a process. Right. And so in all the centers, we have proofs of writers, like we'll have Amy Tan's 28th draft of The Bone Setter's Daughter, and it's framed one page from that. Just say, even though you're a professional writer like Amy Tan, it's a process. So when you start that first draft, it doesn't mean you're finished. It doesn't mean it's good or bad. You're a writer, you're not a writer. You're a good writer, you're bad. That first draft is just part of the process, the beginning of the process. So when you make it clear that we'll be there along the way, that there'll be caring adults next to you, whether it's your teacher, your tutors, but you'll get there. And I think it's relaxing. It eases, I think, it creates sort of a sense of safety and a sense of lower pressure to know that first draft isn't the final draft. And I think that sort of process-oriented approach can make really good writers, if not great writers, out of everybody. Right. You know? So I'm a grinder. Like, I do 20 drafts of anything. And my first draft of anything is absolutely horrible. So I live it, you know, every day. It's a process.
Well, I'd love to pivot to 826DC. Can you tell us a little bit about what that creative space is for you? Not to put you on the spot, but I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah, I guess when I sat down to write the essay, I just had been sent it from my teacher, and usually he wanted us to write it like in a way that wasn't the conventional, like, this is my definition. He wanted us to create a scene and something that would be, you know, memorable and leave the audience thinking and questioning, like, themselves as a citizen and as an artist. So I guess the space that I inhabited was more like, you know, like a quiet space. I was just sitting on my bed and just typing out everything that like initially was coming to my mind, and then afterward I tried to just piece it together and create, like, just connected the dots. So I guess somewhere that's just quiet, but then I also get like a lot of inspiration, you know, from like talks like today. Like I already started like drafting pieces in my mind and stuff like that. So, you know, stuff like that.
So far I've heard the opportunity to reset. I've heard process friendly. I've heard quiet. I've heard turning everything off, isolation, but we've also heard not being in solitude. Something that a space that inspires exploration, curiosity. It needs to smell good, or at least smell enticing in some way. And as Dave said earlier, always keep it weird. We have someone else from 826 DC. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you see that as creative space and how you work to create that space in your work?
Yeah, so at 826 DC, our new storefront, we just moved. We used to be the Museum of Unnatural History in DC in Columbia Heights. When we moved, though, we moved into the historic Tivoli building now. We're in the same building as the Gala Theater. And as we were looking at the space before building out, it's not Art Deco, it's Italian Renaissance Revival. We had to do a lot of investigation on the style of the building. And so we started thinking about, you know, the Tivoli building in the 20s, and it started inspiring us to think about the 20s illusionist and Houdini, and we really liked the concept behind the superhero supply company and the empowerment of that kind of character that students can kind of take on and embody in the space. And so we landed on magic. So we are Tivoli's astounding magic supply company, Illusionarium, and deluxe haberdashery. We are the only magic shop between Baltimore and Richmond, and so we have a lot of really amazing characters that are magic aficionados that stumble in, and they're helping us decide what we need to stock in the space. And kids are learning magic tricks every day, and staff is getting really good at lots of different magic tricks. And it really is, we call it a third space, right? It's not work, it's not school, it's not home. It is this other space where kids can really be themselves and take on any persona that they want. And you know, we decorate the space with student work, and the kids really feel like they own that space, and we're just living in that space with them, right? But it's their home to be creative as much as possible, whether they're visiting us on a field trip and only see us once a year, or if they're in after school tutoring and they come every day, you know, during the week. And I think that, you know, we do try to provide that freedom in that creative space for them, where they can be as weird and quirky as they want, but then we also believe in the discipline of revision, and that's where I think that they start to really feel they can see themselves as writers. They understand the process, and we develop relationship with writers for them, so they can, you know, meet writer mentors and hopefully oftentimes people of color, writers of color, who can come into the space and act as a mentor for them. And it helps see them as an adult and say, well, I could do this for a job, right? And that's an amazing feeling to learn at 9, 10, 11, 15 years old. So come on through. We actually are gonna be at 826 tonight. If when you guys finish up here, you want to stop by and see the new space, Dave will be there. And we have a new executive director that's coming on in May, Zachary Clark. He'll be there as well. So if anyone wants to come by tonight, feel free.
Great, thank you. And so I want to talk a little bit about something that Davida mentioned in her presentation, protecting the psyche, and the idea of somewhere where they can feel safe, somewhere where people can feel empowered, where you can feel empowered, that is critical. But for some people, that's a luxury. So what can we do in the absence of these things that we've called out as being critical to finding this creative space? What can we do to remain creative or help create or remain creative or find that in the absence of those things?
I think you just need a receptive audience, no matter where, and it doesn't cost anything to have somebody that's ready to listen to you, you know? Like, I a deadline and a ready recipient before I can start writing anything, really. I need it to know that I can show it to somebody. And just like our students need to know that there's going to be a caring adult on the other side that will listen, that will read it, won't judge, will tell it, will walk them through the process. And I think anybody, no matter how old you are, you need that receptive early audience, that authentic outside audience, that sort of early non-judgmental audience, but supportive audience to receive. You know, and I think that that has something to do with feeling safe. Feeling like you can take risks, but that you have a safe space to create in. And I think that that's like the number one prerequisite, but I can't imagine any atmosphere where that doesn't exist in some way. But I'll tell you a story. So I was on the Gaza Strip last week, right? It's a long story, but I was research trip, part of a delegation to talk, to look into and try to illuminate conditions for the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza. And I went to a concert, the first concert that had been there in a long time, because Hamas does not like live music. And I interviewed this band that was playing for the first time, and you know, to have like a big concert with a lot of young people, have to separate women over here and men over there, and they're not allowed to dance, and you can't move too much, and all of this, but they still found a way to like feel like they had an audience, that it was high risk to do this, and in the end, Hamas shut down the concert in the middle of it because it was too much moving, and the band got in trouble, and I interviewed the band leader right after he got back from the police station, where he had like a 3-hour interrogation. This sounds like a really terrible story, but at the same time, they had found an audience amidst very difficult circumstances, but an audience that said, we want to hear you, we're here to listen, we're going to risk, you know, trouble for ourselves, and the band took an equal risk, but it sort of was a metaphor for the making of and the experience of art in any context, which is always a little bit of a risk. It's always scary. But if that audience is there and there's that alchemy between creator and audience, they're in it together, and you can say, we're going to share that burden with you, we're going to share that risk, we're going to welcome you, accept you. Something really great can happen. And for an hour of this concert, when I was there, it was pretty great. And then, of course, they got shut down. But they will start again, they'll do it again, and they're given courage and I think emboldened by the reaction that they got for even that long. Does that make any sense?
Yes,
Yeah.
it makes complete sense. Sure. I've always wanted to have a peace garden in the Gaza Strip. I wanted to plant a garden because it is very fertile there. They can grow avocados and beautiful things, date trees. I thought if we started a garden there and it employed people with meaningful work, and they could be fed from it, and families could be fed from it. It would only be, you know, for all the people who live there, whether they're Palestinian or Israeli, and that would be a way to, and funded from around the world.
Well, they still do. I visited farms. They're doing a lot of farming in
well,
Gaza.
I know they do, and they have sell olive oil from Palestine that supports the projects in agriculture. I just wanted to say one thing about the room, the space, because of course I've been working in schools, and I do feel like that is our place to really create an environment that feels incredibly caring and you know, really empowering to kids. And one thing that we do is we think about the values that we're trying to communicate and for children to absorb. And so, for instance, if we want them the value of equality, then we want them all to sit at the table together. Or if we are talking about diversity, we have the cooking equipment on the shelves that comes from all different countries. There are implements from India, implements from Mexico, mortars and pestles, and just the feeling of a multicultural kitchen is extremely important. And just one little example, because I think you'll all relate to this. We do a, what's it called? Iron Chefs. Iron Chefs. Okay. And the kids, when they heard that we were going to do Iron Chefs in the kitchen, everybody wanted to be involved. But it's not just judging kids on presentation and taste. It's how well does their table work together and communicate? How well do they clean up the space after they work? How are they thinking about doing it differently if they didn't win, or even if they did win? And it's amazing to see hear the conversation that happens at the table. It feels, like the kitchen of Chez Panisse. They're saying to each other, now, we really should have roasted those peppers the way you said so next time. Maybe we could have put the sauce on that instead of on this. It's like the most amazing kind of critical analysis, being very self-critical. And it's a beautiful thing. I mean, it leads to collaboration, which we're talking about. And it's just not, none of them felt judged. I mean, they were happy for the table that won. Right. I mean, if you can imagine, because it really turns Iron Chefs on its head. And mind you, it's a challenge to think about what you can make from an egg, a bunch of chard. You can use all the spices you want, but it's the way to encourage inventiveness and all of that. And of course, I just got carried away. So.
Well, Alice, both you and Dave have talked about working with young people extensively, and I think what you've illuminated in some of what you've said earlier today is that there are these threats to the survival of creativity, to the nourishing of creativity.
Yes.
And so I'd like for you to speak to that a bit.
Well, I think we heard at the last session when they were talking about the town. Was it Melanie talking
Melanie
about?
in Richmond.
Yes, she was talking about how they have all this art in the town, and then, 60% of the kids, no, 75% of the kids are on free and reduced lunch. And what does this really mean? Well, that's what it really means, is that kids are coming to school hungry. And 1 in 2 is going to have diabetes. 1 in 2. So just think about what that means, that it's a moral question and it's an urgent question, and we are not answering it. And so we have to think of how we can feed every child in this country a free and nutritious, delicious school lunch. And we have to come up with a way. Now, I mean, there's a soda tax here. Possibility. And maybe we have to make that real and pay for that. But if this were considered like a war, we would have the money right now. And it's something so, I can't say enough about it. I'm so shocked, and I think that the door to the cafeteria, strangely, is the open door in the schools right now. And I think if we went through that door with all the organic farmers and all the artists and everybody who's at this gathering, we would bring something extraordinary into we'd cause a delicious and beautiful revolution in the public schools. But we need to completely change the way that we're teaching.
Sir.
We talk about defining creative space, and I just want to throw out, I'm sorry, we were talking about defining creative space, and I just want to throw out something. I've got 14-year-old girl that lives with our family, and she's a writer, and she's won many awards at that age. And I walked in one evening, and she was putting a story line together, and she was on her computer. And I said, "Oh, what are you doing?" And she says, "Well, I'm brainstorming with some friends over some story ideas." And I said, that's great. Who are they? And proceeded to give names. One was in Japan, one was in Germany, one was in England. And you know, one of the things, and I've just been blown away today here by everyone. And one of the people that's really impressed me was the Surgeon General. I can't believe I can come and be so motivated by a Surgeon General, but I was. But the one area that I haven't heard much about that she was speaking to with her example is Silicon Valley and using the internet positively to create and do all kinds of things like that. So I just want to share that with you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other? Oh, yes. Ma'am, right here. And there's a microphone coming to you.
Thank you. When you asked earlier, what are the preconditions to creativity, my mind immediately went to openness to everything that is around you, because there's creative ideas that come from every aspect of life, whether it's in the home or on the job or on the bus or in a subway. There's always creativity flowing, and that if we're open, we can get creative ideas from anything. Even just this morning, I'm a playwright, so I'm always listening for ideas, and I got several ideas for new works, for new projects, you know, just by listening. And, you know, as far as space is concerned, you know, for me personally, the space can really be anywhere. But when it comes down to really putting the work on paper, I need to be in that quiet place, alone by myself. I may have a house full of people, but I need to steal away to somewhere where it's quiet so that there aren't the distractions and the interruptions. You know, and then also, you know, being able to create a space for young people, such as these young people from Duke Ellington, to use their gifts and their talents before a vast audience, because how else are they going to get the opportunity to grow and develop if those of us who are older don't invest in them at no cost?
And you can give the mic to this young man right in front of you. He had his hand up, and then we have someone over here. Okay.
Well, for me, as a musician, and specifically a jazz musician, I'm most creative when I'm playing with other people. And as like a lover of improvisation and doing improvisation all the time, like we can start off playing one song, but then we'll end up playing something that's completely new to all of us. And, you know, we feed off of each other. Like one person will do something like, oh, I like that. And then we'll end up somewhere completely different from where we started. So basically, I get creative together as a unit. We can create a lot of different things, and because so many ideas coming together, and it's an explosion of just greatness. So, yeah.
Thank you.
I just want to mention that when I hear about creativity, also came to my mind struggle and need. I'm a first-generation immigrant. I'm from Peru, and I grew up in an era of terrorism in which we went out and we didn't know if a bomb was going to explode a couple blocks from our street, or where you got on the newspaper what day of the week you were not going to have power or water, or when your father will be laid off from work next month, and God knows what's going to happen. So in those moments of struggle and need, you come with creativity. And when there is love and there is struggle, new ideas come to your mind. When you have to feed your family, you find a way because there's love, there's care. When you need to make sure that your kids do their homework, even though you have to work 12 hours a day, you are going to make sure that your kids find a way to get their homework done for the next day. I think when there are not enough resources and there is love, creativity comes right around the corner.
Beautiful. Love plus struggle.
No, it's beautiful when there's love. It works. But I just want to say again that we're living in a culture that has indoctrinated the littlest of children into a way of thinking about the world that is contrary to creativity. And so we're talking about, that place of fast, cheap, and easy. And it imprisons us. And we can't see out of it. And it's not about care. It's getting us addicted to salt, to sugar. We're getting sick from it. And once you're on drugs and all of the above, it's impossible to reach children and bring them into. I understand completely about seeing the beauty of the world around it. But when you're sensorially deprived, you're not even smelling the food anymore.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't have any smell and it doesn't have any taste. So you don't know what you're trying to get love from an iPad. I mean, it's something very, very serious, and I feel lucky that I was kind of brought up before this, or at least I saw it coming. And my childhood was in another pre-fast food place. But I see what's going on. And I think having the awareness of that, being conscious of the messages that were being delivered. I mean, everywhere in schools, they allow you to advertise. On all the sports teams, everything are trying to sell you something. And these kids are pretty addicted when you see them in the carriage holding an iPhone.
I want to build on the fast, cheap, and easy real quick.
Okay.
And just talk
and I got the rap sign.
Oh, you did?
So
well,
make your fast, cheap, and easy comment. Fast, cheap,
and
and easy.
I just wanted to, yeah, exactly. Boy, there's a little paradox for you. No, but and Maria from Sesame Street said it earlier, and she was saying, sorry, I have to, because she was so important to me as Maria from Sesame Street, I have to call her that. But she was talking about this tendency to try to measure everything. And we are in an era, and I think it's actually somewhat similar, is that policymakers are again and again trying to find ways to measure creativity, to try to measure the results of, for example, working on a book at Duke Ellington, or the results of music in the classroom, or measure this and measure this. What are the outcomes if we spend more money on the arts in schools? What are the measurable outcomes? Do more students, do they score higher on this test and that test? And I think that because we're in this mode where we feel like everything can be measured and we're increasingly subject to the datification of our lives, we sometimes dismiss or forget or put to the side things that cannot be measured. And I see it again and again, and I know there's a lot of arts administrators here, but when we look for funding for our centers, there's a lot of stuff we cannot measure.
That's exactly right.
And when we can't measure the effect of after-school tutoring, or we can't measure the effect of working on a creative writing project, a lot of people, their eyes glaze over and they go elsewhere. And we are, a few miles north of Silicon Valley, so we see a lot of this, people wanting measurables all the time. And I think that we as people that work in this sphere, have to push back as often as we can and say, you know what, just because we cannot measure it in new data models and put it on spreadsheets, it doesn't mean it doesn't have value. There are other ways to measure. There are qualifiable measurements as opposed to quantifiable measurements. There's ways that you can see just by meeting a young person and the effects of the arts on them. Oral interviews, all of these different things, measuring the fact that does this book, that tells stories from students about their concepts of home, does this matter? Is it measurable? I don't know, but it matters. Does a book matter? Does a permanent, marker and monument to student thoughts on this subject, does it matter? I would say it matters. How do you measure it? I have no idea. But so we have to again and again remember that that creativity cannot always be measured. but it's of no less value. And I think that anytime we can remind ourselves and remind those who do want to and feel like we need to measure everything, that it cannot always be measured, we will be creating a bulwark against that tendency, and I think creating that safe space for creativity that we've been talking about. We got to.
Well, I think that's a good charge.
Yeah.
You know, you've raised some alarms and alerts and things that we need to do to protect that space that we work so hard to create. I'm sorry we have to wrap it up. Davida, you got all that? I have some really cool notes. Yes. Awesome. Anne-Marie, you got all that? All right. So we're going to hear what they came up with, and we'll see how close they get to what we think we talked about today. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Alice.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.